Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to the reset review. This is getting confusing at this point, actually. So, I did part 1 of the set review with Jompy, but then Jompy had a show match, and he couldn't make it. And then I got Dapper on, who is currently below me. Say hi.
Hey guys.
Yeah, and I was going to get him for 90 cards, and I thought, why don't I just re-record the 30 cards, because what's going to happen is there's going to be 30 cards missing, and we're going to refer to previous cards, and then someone's going to say, actually, that card isn't that good, and that's going to be really awkward. So we're not doing that, we're doing the entire thing again, which means as a result, there's going to be 2 part 1s.
You should have just said that I was a diva and refused to do it unless I would have been allowed to review all the cards and have all of my opinions heard.
Oh my god, but yeah, this is, so we're doing all of it again. We're doing the whole part 1 again, then we're doing part 2 at some other point, because I don't have time to do 2 parts at once today, and then we're doing part 2 at some point, and then the whole thing will be out by the end of the weekend. That's what I can guarantee. I'm just not sure of the exact timetable. There's like 13 videos being released on my end from like 4 days. It's ridiculous. And I'm not even joking, it actually is 13.
So there's a lot of cards and not a lot of time. So
yeah, we'll just get back into it straight away. Now, first things first, patch. Soulfire changed from 0 to 1. Go.
okay, so Soulfire is the only one of the change cards I think might still be playable. Just because
Still 4 damage.
one mana for 4 damage. You still get the big tempo swing, but it's obviously huge now. Like the difference between 0 and 1 mana is massive.
The biggest, I think, between anything.
Yeah, like in the zoo mirror, you play a flame imp, you soulfire the other guy's flame imp, and suddenly you're ahead for the rest of the game.
I think
Not
the
true
reason
anymore.
this was nerfed actually was because of Mechwarper. They did not want a situation where you have 2 Mechwarper lists and the Warlock always wins.
Well, yeah, partly is the problem that
'Cause you just play
Mech
Mechwarper,
Zoo
Soulfire.
was and is probably going to be quite good, and I actually think this nerf is huge for Giants.
I actually don't think Handlock is going to survive this set. There will
Um,
be a Warlock control deck. It just won't be Handlock.
yeah, well, as a die-hard handlock player, I'm gonna have a go at making it work, but
Obviously, yeah.
so it's something to bear in mind that there will be a lot less handlock around during the rest of the review, just because being able to go like Giant Soulfire on turn 4 is such a huge tempo swing. Like,
Yeah, it
and
is. Or even like
it
Drake
just
Soulfire is
yeah,
not as
it
big, but it's still big.
it just like dramatically raises the chances of not being able to play a 4 drop because you're just going to die.
You can't play 4 drops, and you also can't play like if you have the aggressive start, like with Iron Beak Cal Ancient Watcher, you actually have to use your Ancient Watcher. Now you can't just get aggressive with your Ancient Watcher. You kind of have to use it for trading because you can't Soulfire or anything anymore, and you also can't really. You just can't do a bunch of stuff. You can't Soulfire after Jiraxis on turn 9, which is actually relevant sometimes.
Yeah, um,
So it's a big nerf in control. In Zoo, you still have a bunch of random mana lying around every so often.
yeah, and it's just suddenly like Soulfire is like one of the better late game cards in Zoo, even though it costs 0.
On turn 5.
When
Just
you've
late
got
game.
Well, I mean, yeah. Once you get into the late game where you start tapping every turn, and it's also important because a lot of the time in Zoo, you're so close to the finish line, and you just need that extra like last couple of points of damage. But you don't actually have that much burst that works if you don't have the board. You just have Doomguard and Soulfire
It's
a
the
lot of the time.
most card efficient top
Um,
deck burst
so
damage for Zoo.
if you don't play Soulfire, then you're dramatically reducing your chances of being able to top deck that damage before you die.
Yeah.
So maybe you'll still play Soulfire because of that. Although maybe you'll also play the new Warlock spell, which
I think that's more of a control spell, but we'll get there towards the end of the set, so
yeah.
yeah, we'll get there when we get there. Now, Soulfire is the one which we'll probably still see play. Gadgetzan got its cost up to 6, which I'm happy about because I think Gadgetzan was getting borderline just stupidly broken.
Well, I mean, yeah, eventually Gadgetzan was going to have to be nerfed.
They've been avoiding it for a year. I'm not joking. Miracle Rogue has been a problem so many times, and they keep nerfing other rogue cards.
It's a bit bizarre that they kind of made so many like deal 4 damage to a random minion stuff to deal with the Stealth Auctioneer.
And then
and
nerfed
then
it.
they made the card basically unplayable. And like, make no mistake,
This
it
is
is
a massive nerf. 1 mana, like, to give you an idea, the difference between 5 and 6 mana basically converts the speed of Miracle Rogue into Miracle Druid.
right. It's the difference between being able to go like the difference of doing Auctioneer Coin Conceal, for example, on turn 5
Turn 6
is,
is a
or
big
turn 6
difference.
is huge. It's makes you 1 turn slower, so the Druid kills you 1 turn earlier with the combo.
Yeah, something
You
else
know,
really
and
awkward is if you're going second, so you want to set up that, your opponent can actually play Lotheb on turn 5, and you actually just can't play Gadgetzan.
I
Like,
mean, if they
period.
played Lothar, do you want to play Gadgets?
Lotheb shuts down Gadgetzan anyway, but the point is, like, it's even worse now.
Yeah, and or you can think another way to think about it is you get to play 1 less spell with your Auctioneer every time,
That's true. One
which is
less
massive.
mana is a lot, actually. Not to mention, it means you can't really go off on the turn you play it. You kind of have to wait a
Um,
turn now. You can't ever get a bunch of cards in the same turn. Unless you
we've
have
already
plebs.
we've only been talking about Miracle Rogue, but obviously this nerf is even more significant for the classes that don't get preparation.
Shaman will never play this ever, ever, ever again.
Yeah,
Even though they weren't playing it that much anyway.
normal Miracle Druid.
Miracle Druid, it takes too much mana now. It's just, you don't have prep, you have Innervate, so you need, like, you can't reduce it by 3, you reduce it by 2, so you actually need to wait until turn 7 or something to go off a lot of times. Now it has to be turn 8, and that's just really slow.
Just like, yeah, I mean, from like everything we've ever seen in Hearthstone, one thing that we've learned is that 1 mana is a lot to
It's a lot more
change.
than it looks. Like,
Uh,
that's...
yeah.
Nothing says that more, though, than the Flare nerf. Now, I have a bone to pick about this. Blizzard, you said, and I would quote you, but I could not find the news post. It was a while ago. You said Flare was a card that was bad for the game, but you weren't going to change it.
I believe they said one of their usual kind of wishy-washy, non-committal
Yes,
things
yes,
about
they
how we're
do this.
looking at Flair
We're looking at it. It's true. So what they did was they were like, let's kill it.
you know, they decided that we've been looking at Flair long enough, and I think it's fine.
I'm happy about this nerf, not because Flare is dying, but because it means that you'll have to play tracking again, which means that the skill cap of the game goes up, and the difference between good hunter players and bad hunter players is huge.
Yeah, maybe you can come. Maybe tracking can come back now.
Well,
That's a good point.
tracking is way better than Flare now, and the only reason tracking wasn't being played was because you needed Flare for the mirror.
Yeah, certainly Flair will never be played now,
Again,
even if secrets are really popular.
just play the new Kazan Mystic.
Yeah, because Unmystic is just way better than Flair because
It's
even in
bad.
the matchups where Flair is useless,
It's like what you put it
playing a
next to Cold Pet,
4 mana 4/3. Playing a 4 mana 4/3 is better than
and
to
just
2
wait.
mana. It's nothing.
The other thing is like you put it next to Cold Pet, and they cost the same amount. It's just like
Yeah,
okay.
right. If you say Call Pet is bad because sometimes you waste 2 mana, then
Flare is really
Flair
bad.
is wasting 2 mana in like 70 to 90% of your games.
Yeah, it's bad. But anyway, so on to the rest of the expansion features. Not really to talk about this. Packs are the same. Dust is the same. They're basically cards. Arena, you get new packs as opposed to old packs. I think the only thing that's wrong with this is that you should be able to choose between when you get your arena reward.
Yeah, obviously everyone would prefer that, but
I don't really see the point
I don't think
in
it's going to
not
be too much
doing
of
that,
an
to
issue.
be honest. I mean, it's not much of an issue, but it's just kind of something that it's kind of it's not necessary. It's just
Yeah,
kind of silly.
well,
It doesn't exist.
Blizzard gave their usual, oh, we didn't want to make things too complicated,
Nice
but
deck slots.
yeah. um,
Yeah, it's one of the wishy-washy
and
things.
the player base is predictably up in arms about it, but
Yeah. Spectator mode, something I'm not up in arms about. This is the best thing about the entire patch for me. I
oh,
get
this
to
is going
do
to be really good.
live versus series. I talked about this on the other first part. But basically,
Yeah,
I get
because
to do live stuff and I get to do crazy stuff, and I like it.
you can spectate your friends. If you're friends with both players, then you can see both hands. It's
Ooh, that's an idea. I can actually spectate some of you guys when you're playing tournaments and cast them.
yeah, I
We've
mean, it
gone
just
into
makes
the theme
everything
mill
easier
now.
for. So hopefully, we'll be able to see better Hearthstone production values
Oh yeah, remember Gamer
and
Connect?
more content because it means it's a lot easier for people with less like experience the barrier to entry for creating your own Hearthstone content is like much lower now.
Do you remember
Which is really good.
Connect tournaments, by the way? They used to cast them. I talked about
Oh,
this
there
a
was a
bit
cast
before.
live and it was
I've been
horrendous.
involved in that, and the reason it was horrendous was because the process you need to go through to live cast is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So with spectator mode, that's basically turned into about 30-second setup, which is insane.
You can literally just capture the screen of you looking at the game.
Yeah, you literally just record, you just stream.
So no more, oh my god, what card did he play? Oh, it's been pulled out of his hand, but we can't see because the stream is lagging. And
oh my god, I'm so happy about that because syncing FLVs is something I will never have to do again. In fact, the last time I'm ever doing it is this versus series. Thank you, Dapper. Because Dapper's on a Mac, so he can't record an MP4. But yeah, I'll never have to sync FLVs again. I'll never have to sync hands again. That's kind of helpful. So yeah. I'm just really happy about it.
So we've got spectator mode, and the cost of a few cards has been changed, but also there's some new stuff.
And then there's a bunch of other stuff, like just skim over Android. Android's useless. Anyway, well, it's not useless. I just don't care. Anyway, so we'll go back to the bottom of this very, very nicely organized list, which is in reverse cost and reverse alphabetical order. It's like it was literally designed for a set review. But anyway, so first card is the Wisp of the set. Not the worst card in the set, but just the derpiest. Target dummy. 0 mana, 0/2, taunt, mech, with the stupidest face on a target dummy I've ever seen.
I think this card is actually quite good. It's miles better than a Wisp, obviously, because it doesn't die to 1 damage. Which is huge. And if you think about how good cards like Mirror Image and Shield Bearer have been, like the ability to stop an attack for free is sometimes worth a card. Plus, it's a 0-cost mech, so you can use it with the stuff that requires you to have a mech on the board.
But not Mechwarper.
Yeah, well, there's a sad lack of synergy with the best mech card.
Too little.
And so another advantage is it's free. So so if you're playing a deck with Jeeves or Divine Favor and your goal is to empty your hand, Wisp was a bit too terrible for that strategy.
Favor, I could definitely see.
Yeah.
If Paladin's a thing. I will say this is one of the worst cards in the entire set in Arena, though, because it doesn't give you card advantage in any way.
Oh, yeah, it's terrible in Arena.
But in Constructed, it's one of those cards where I can see it seeing play at some point. It fits into the category of cards which are like, I don't think they'll still play, but if they do, I won't be shocked.
Yeah, I expect this to see play at some point, even if it's not straight.
There's quite a few cards in this set which go in that category. As I said, I put cards in 3 sets of cards, which is playable and constructed, why the hell does this exist, and fun.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's worth noting as well that it has synergy with some of the other class mechs. Like, so you can use it as your mech for Tinkertown Technician or for
bot. Wow. 0/6.
Or it's pretty good with Iron Sensei. Both because it's 2/4 with Iron Sensei and you get to protect your sensei.
I was more thinking the warrior one, actually.
Oh yeah, with Screwdriver Clunker it's good as well.
It's the same, but Screwdriver doesn't die really to removal.
So maybe that will be a thing.
Maybe we'll have to see.
You can play it with Echo of Medivh, where you just want to play as much cheap stuff as possible and copy it.
Giant combinations with Echo of Medivh. We'll get there. That is the most combo-centric card I think they've released in a very long time.
Yeah.
We'll get there when we get there. But Target Dummy, bottom line, might see play at some point. Not really a card I'm looking at heavily, but if someone puts it in a deck and it works, I'll be like, oh, that's where that card works. Okay. Bad in Arena, don't pick it. It's like Wisp level in Arena. It's worse, actually. Unbelievably. But anyway, Clockwork Gnome. Clockwork Gnome was one of the first spoilers we got. 1 mana, 2/1 with, it's a mech, and Death Rattle, add a spare part to your hand. Now, the spare parts are conveniently just below this. Oh, this has been messed up a lot. Oh, there's all the tokens! Wow, I haven't actually seen all these tokens. But anyway, there are 7 spare parts. +1 attack, +1 health, bounce a minion to your hand, give a minion taunt, give a minion stealth for a turn. I don't know how that made it in there, but then there's reversing switch, which is a crazed alchemist effect, and freeze a minion. So on average, these are supposed to be worth about half a card.
Maybe a bit less.
Unless it's Finicky Cloaking Field.
Yeah, Finicky Cloak Field was very exciting when Auctioneer was still a thing, but now it's fairly bad.
Now it's going to be doing
maybe the
other
worst
things.
One. Although Time Rewinder and Rusty Horn are both fairly.
I think reversing switch is crazy. Finicky Cloaking
reversing
Field
switch is by far the best.
Finicky Cloaking Field is also absolutely insane with Mechwarper.
It's a fairly good point.
So, like, Finicky Cloaking Field is going to cause some rage.
Although if you have to burn a mana on Finicky Cloak Field, it somewhat defeats the point of Mechwarper. But
oh, kind of. But it's like, if you don't need the effect this turn, but you can use it next turn, it'll come up. It'll come up. It also protects. There's some stupider ones, like protecting Ysera for a turn, which is not as relevant because Ysera probably won't be seeing that much play. But
yeah, but it is a relevant thing that you can stealth your Ragnaros or whatever.
You can't use it on Rag because it does damage at the end of the
turn. Oh, Rag has the damage thing like Demolish It, yeah.
Yeah. Faux Reaper. That sounds fair.
Yeah, or Trog's or the Earthinator.
Oh god, yeah. Conceal. That's so stupid. But anyway, Finicky Cloaking Field will cause some rage, but the rest of them are just supposed to be about half a card, maybe a bit less value. That's what it's supposed to be. I think spare parts are fairly well designed.
So the real question with Clockwork Gnome is a spare part better than the 2 damage that you get from playing Leper Gnome instead?
Yes.
And I think it probably is, yeah.
It's also a mech.
If you think about what 1 attack or 1 health does with for 1 mana, it's probably better than doing 2 damage to your opponent's face.
Doing 2 damage to your opponent's face is actually pretty bad because I've got a feeling that the game is there's a trend of high health, low attack cards in the set. So I've got a feeling the game is going to be less face rushy and more tempo you out until like kill you in 2 turns.
I think it would probably be a mistake to write off aggro just yet, especially because it gets new cards like Clockwork Gnome, which is it's a death rattle play with Undertaker. It means that one of the reasons that Hunter was so good was that you get Web Spinner, which is another 1 mana death rattle in addition to Leper Gnome that you can use to make your Undertaker much more consistent. But now everyone can run 4 Leper Gnomes if they want. And additionally, Clockwork Gnome is a mech. And crucially, it's the only 1-drop mech, which is really important because...
it's the only 1-drop mech, period, I think. No, there's one in Warrior. Which is
it's the only 1-drop mech for everyone except Warrior. And that's a big deal. We've seen the game kind of dominated by 1-drops. I hope maybe that's overstating it, but since Naxxramas, in a way that it just wasn't before.
Curve, basically.
And if you don't do anything on turn 1, then it really hurts you. So Clockwork Gnome is a way for mechs to do that. And you can play for 0 with Mechwarper, which is huge.
Coin Mechwarper, Clockwork, that's a start.
That's, I mean...
It's absurd. You can play...
It's on par with Undertaker, Coin, Leper Gnome, if not better. I
think it's better because Mechwarper has a much more powerful effect than Undertaker because it costs more.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the good thing about Clockwork Gnome is it allows you to get instant value out of your Mechwarper, so even if your Mechwarper dies, you've done something with it.
It's also part of a turn 2 kill, which we will get to when we get to Murmuron's Head.
Oh, the bizarre druid.
The stupid magical Christmas land will show up in one of Trolden's videos eventually. Turn 2 kill. But Clockwork Gnome is basically, it's the value 1-drop of the set. I think there's only 2 1-drops that are neutral in this set, and one of them is terrible, and the other one's pretty good.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see because one of the reasons that maybe you might want to play the Undertaker engine still over the Mech engine is that, or maybe it's
fast.
Combine the 2, is that it is fast, and mechs are supposed to be this kind of very rushy kind of throw a load of stuff on the board in a lot of cases.
like
type of style.
they're like
But
Zoo but neutral.
yeah, but actually, one of the reasons that Zoo is so powerful is because it has all the one drops.
Yep.
And so it will be interesting to see. It will make it very difficult to run an aggressive, like pure mech strategy.
Because there aren't that many one-drop mechs. Like, you could do it in Warrior, I think, 'cause you have 4 one-drop mechs. But in other classes, it's really hard to pull off. One thing I will say is that I don't think aggro is bad. I just think that aggro decks are going to morph a bit to act a bit more like Zoo, where it's like they're tempoing you out so they get more repetitive damage as opposed to, just hit the face repeatedly.
Although Burn is still alive, as we'll see when we get to the Shaman cards.
True.
So, and in fact, the lack of good one-drop mechs is a good segue onto Cogmaster.
Cogmaster is terrible. 1 mana,
See,
1/2.
yeah. Initially, and when we reviewed the initial batch of cards, I said the Cogmaster was terrible.
The funny thing is, I remember back then I said that if there was enough mechs that you could play in that kind of style, I don't know exactly how I phrased it, but I didn't think it was good. I just thought it had potential. But with the rest of the set coming out, I'm just like, no. One thing it does do, however, which is maybe important, I don't know how relevant this is, but one thing it does do is it breaks the Mechwarper mirror. Because if you get Cogmaster down on turn 1, they have to answer, otherwise they lose their Mechwarper.
Right. Yeah, and I think that the fact that there aren't any other good one-drop mechs makes Cogmaster a lot better than I originally evaluated
because
that.
You don't have that many other
just
options.
Because you don't have very many good options in some classes for good one-drops, and that makes Cogmaster a little bit better. I, however, doubt that it will be good. It's something that you would definitely want to trade off very aggressively because you have the problem that they could just kill all of your other mechs
and then it becomes worse. Yeah, so it's
run over the 1/2 for free.
It's okay in Arena if you have enough mechs, but that might be a bit sketchy. So I'm not sure how to really categorize this card. I think it might see some play eventually, but it's not really a card I'm paying attention to a lot on the face value of things. The next card, however, is arguably the best card in the set. Definitely the best neutral card in the set.
Yeah, so Mechwarper is
absurd.
Crazy.
2/mana, 2/3, Mech, and it's a common, so this will be running around Arena a lot. Your mechs cost 1 less. First of all, a lot of people have been saying, hey, it's Pint-Sized Summoner. No, this is not Pint-Sized Summoner. It has 1 more health, so it doesn't die as frequently. It can reduce things to 0. It affects multiple things in 1 turn, and it's a mech.
Can I read the...
Have you got an essay for this?
The flavor text again.
This is flavored?
Oh, so I remember saying this before, but...
Yeah, the gallon-sized summoner.
The Pint-Sized Summoner's flavor text is... She's quite jealous of the Gallon-Sized Summoner.
This is the Gallon-Sized Summoner.
This is the Gallon-Sized Summoner. So there's a couple of things you can do with Mechwarper. The first, you can use it to play a whole load of cheap mechs all at once, which is really good in a lot of strategies. Or you can use it to just wild growth yourself for free. So you can play the Mechwarper, then you can play like a 4-drop mech, then you can play like a 5-drop mech if you're a priest.
There are certain openings with Mechwarper that I actually think are just unbeatable if you can't kill the Mechwarper on the first turn. Like the warrior, the 2/5 Screwjank. Basically, Screwjank Clunker is a 2/5 for 4 in warrior to mech, and it gives +2/+2 to a friendly mech. Now, if you play Mechwarper on turn 2 and it sticks, which means they don't have the ability to kill 2/3 on turn 2, you play this thing for 3 mana because it gets reduced. You get a 4/5 that can attack immediately. And if they couldn't kill the 2/3, there is no way they can kill a 4/5. You just win on the spot, basically. It's miserable.
And I mean, to some extent, we already live in a world where if you can't kill a 2/3 on turn 1, you die. But
this just kills you very quickly.
Mechwarper is the card that kind of binds mechs together and makes you actually want to play a mech deck.
Something I will say is that we could spend the 2 hours talking about this card, but what's probably a better approach is to go to the other mechs and then refer back to Mechwarper, because it's a bit weird talking about combos when we haven't even looked at the cards yet, like on video. So I think we'll come back to Mechwarper every time we see a mech and just see kind of how well it works with it.
Yeah, I think because we can't just analyze cards in a vacuum. You have to talk about combos, especially with a card like this. But
Exactly. This is one of the more
yeah.
combo-y cards in the entire set. So
Okay.
we'll come back to it. Anyway, Micro Machine, 2 mana 1/2 common mech at the start of at the start of each turn, not your turn, gain +1 attack. This wasn't spectacular when we saw it at the beginning of the spoiler season, and it's less spectacular now.
Yeah. So it's not terrible. It grows at the start of every turn. So when your opponent's turn it's a 2/2, and yours is a 3/2, and then it can grow even bigger to a 4/2 or
2/2 is
5/2.
really bad though, because it seems the theme of this set is 2 mana 2/3s.
Yeah. So it's kind of like acceptable, but the problem is that every class except Hunter gets a 2 mana mech. That's better than Necro Machine.
By far.
And will you want to play more than 4 2-drop mechs? Probably not.
Probably
So
not.
this will be a recurring theme with the other 2-drop mech as well.
Yeah, it's like Micro Machine. I will say it's quite good in Arena though, because if 2-drops already apply a lot of pressure, which is why you want a lot of them, and they do well with trading and things like that. But this thing, if they don't have a 2-drop, it just does so much damage on its own. They have to
Yeah,
kill it,
it's quite good in Arena because if they miss their 2-drop, it kills the Yeti.
and does like 7 damage to them. It does a lot is the point. Like if you're going first, it does 7. If you're going second, it only does 3, but then it kills their Yeti. So yeah, that's pretty insane value for a 2-drop. But in constructed, the bar is a little higher, and people are running more removal, and that can hit this thing. And also, all the 2/3s are going to be really awkward. Like if you're facing off against a Mechwarper and you play Micro Machine, it's just horrible.
Right.
It doesn't kill it, and you lose your guy for free. It's
Yeah. So
not a fantastic card.
Puddle Stomper, on the other hand.
Puddle Stomper is weird. It's a raptor. It is a 2 mana 3/2 common, but it's a murloc. First of all, 2 mana 3/2 is good in Arena. Second of all, Shaman randomly got a murloc theme in this set.
Right. So Murlocs are unfortunately still terrible
Yeah.
because so the kind of best case with Murlocs is you play a bunch of stuff and then they don't remove it, and then you play the Coldlight Seer and the War Leader, and it gets rapidly out of control. But I mean, these days we have Undertaker, which also gets rapidly out of control, but doesn't require you to have 4 minions on the board, otherwise you lose. So we basically have learned that Murlocs are bad since the early days of Constructed, where they did see some tournament play. I don't think they will again. Puddle Stomper is certainly worth playing in a Murloc deck. It's much more difficult to remove than, for example, Murloc Raider. But it's not good enough to drag Murlocs out from the grave of obscurity.
Exactly. The only card in the set that could have done that is in the Shamans things, and we'll get there eventually. But this is
You may, however, see this in Constructed
eventually
from Neptulon.
Yeah, that's true. Again, a Shaman card. We'll get there eventually.
Yes.
But anyway, so Puddle Stomper, Arena, but we'll talk about it a little bit later when we get to the Shaman cards. Recombobulator, also known as Are You Feeling Lucky Unless You're Playing Giants? 2 mana 3/2 epic battlecry. Transform a random friendly minion into a random minion with the same cost. There is too many randoms in this set.
So this is kind of a cool thing that you can do. You can have a big guy and then run over something and then recombobulate it to heal it. You can play it on your battle cry minion where most of the value is already used, like Defender of Argus.
Death Rattle 1.
It transforms, so it doesn't trigger Death Rattle.
Could you imagine if you used... could you imagine if you used Recombobulator on a Fire Elemental that has already used Battlecry and attacked, and you go to Savannah High Main?
Yeah, quite.
Be ridiculous.
And Shaman is kind of a place where this guy might get used, because they do play Argus, and you can play it on your totems.
Argus is the worst 4-drop, I think, in terms of stats. Like, it is flat the worst.
It depends if you think Twilight Drake is worse, which it probably is. But
1 is not that much worse than a 2/3.
So yeah, and you can recombobulate your totem. So suddenly that useless healing totem is now a flame imp, in the best case.
Or Murloc
So
Raider.
yeah, uh, but the problem, I don't know, the problem with this card is that there's is it like, and it's a 2 mana 3/2, which is solid, but is it worth in any deck playing just a solid 2 mana 3/2 when you um, can play a bunch of mechs that synergize with each other, or you can play
Actual good 2-drops. Like, the funny thing is, it's like, does Raptor see play? That's
right.
the main thing.
Obviously, this is like dramatically better than Raptor, but
well,
is it good enough?
But it has to. 2-drops are good now, is the way I look at it. Like, there's Mad Scientist, there's Mechwarper, there's like a couple of the 2-drops coming up, and also the class drop ones are getting really, really good. So Recombobulator feels less like a 2-drop and more like an effect on a body. I'm not sure if that effect is worth playing.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing about it being a 3/2 is you can like play it on turn 2 and not feel too bad, unlike say Crazed Alchemist. But yeah, the question is whether you will want to play this in, for example, Shaman instead of the other 2-drops that you have available to you, like Haunted Creeper or
which is insane with Flame Tongue.
The mech stuff.
There's a new 2-drop that's also a 3/2 in Shaman though, and that thing has Wind Fury.
Exactly. So maybe it will see play sometime somewhere. There'll certainly be someone.
It'll probably be in a control
playing it in a tournament just to be a hipster. But the question is whether it will be. Well, it probably won't see consistent play.
It might be me if I open 2 of them. I like my random stuff, okay? I wouldn't. Like, favorite card in the set, Hobgoblin. That card is terrible, but it's hilarious. But we'll get there when we get there.
I'm not sure it's terrible, you know.
Well, it's not terrible, it's just not
We'll get
good
there.
enough.
We'll
get there. Stone Splinter Trog. The first of the Trogs, the smallest of the Trogs. This is a 2 mana 2/3. It has the Trog effect. So what is the Trog effect? It's basically when your opponent plays a spell, you get something. In this case, the 2/3 gains an attack, becoming a 3/3. I will say good in Arena because 2-drop.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay in Arena just because it's 2 mana 2/3, but on a 2 mana 2/3, there are ones in Constructed which are way better than this.
Way better. There's like I would play a
fairly
2 mana
unlikely
2/3 mech over this. I think
it's fairly unlikely that your opponent will play a spell that doesn't kill the Trog, and then you'll get value. More likely it would just die to like a spider tank or something.
So bad in Constructed. It's not good enough in Constructed. In Arena, you pick it because it's a 2-drop. That's a basic there. Alright. 2 mana, 2/3. Gilblin Stalker. I had to try that name a couple of times when this came out. It is a 2 mana 2/3 with stealth. It is a common, so very good in Arena. Wow. Like 2 mana 2/3 with stealth is insane in Arena. But,
it's like the 2 mana 2/3 is so good in Arena sometimes, but then you just have the risk of just getting eaten by like a 3/3, like, or like worst case scenario, Raging Worgen.
Oh yeah, that's miserable.
Whereas this, you can kind of just pick and choose to trade. It has great synergy with Shattered Sun Cleric, which is a really good Arena card that like you have the problem with
but it doesn't die
having something to buff it. Yeah, Worgen Infiltrator shows that a 1 mana 2/1 is good in Arena, and with stealth, and stealth is a really powerful ability. So of the kind of generically good 2-drops aren't quite good enough for use in Constructed, this is definitely the best by far. However,
this might
still
a little bit of play, but only in one class, which is tempo, slightly more control-y rogue decks, because you can play it. And it gives you a way of dealing with Mechwarper with your hero power, and it also gives you a cold blood target later. I'm not saying it will, I'm just saying it might.
Yeah, again, you have the problem that you kind of want to be playing the synergy stuff like Undertaker or Mechwarper or something like that instead. Gilblin Stalker is useful in stuff where the stealth is really good. Like maybe in Druid where you can, if you draw it late, you can just play it and then have it there to be an extra body for the combo. But yeah, you'd rather just have shaded up in most cases.
Because that's a 3/3 minimum attacking, and then it might be a 4/4 or 5/5. So like.
So this card is definitely not bad, but
careful, it's weak to flare.
It's about as good as a card can be without being useful and constructed.
That's actually a valid point. It's close, but it isn't there. Annoyotron, 2 mana, 1/2. Common, Taunt, Divine Shield, Mech. This is one of the first cards we ever looked at, and to be honest, I think it's got worse with time.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the problem that there are better 2 mana mechs. Annoyotron lives up to his name. It's kind of annoying. You have to use 2 attacks to get through it, but in the early game, 0-1 attack 2-drop.
It would have been good against. We theorized that it would have been okay against things that are like Haunted Creeper and 3/2s, but then the set was like, hey, it's 2/3s.
Yeah. You'd much rather play a Haunted Creeper or your class mech or
yeah, exactly. Like if
something else on turn 2.
Mech, play the Druid Mech deck, which will probably exist because that actually does have a 2 mana 2/2 taunt mech that can be a 3/2 or a 2/3. It's way better than Annoyotron. It's better at trading. It's just Annoyotron's just bad at trading. I think that's really what is the nail in the coffin for this thing. It's annoying when you top deck it, and it's annoying for your opponent to get through when you top deck it. It's just irritating.
Yeah. So I mean, it retains its value into the later game much better than most other 2-drops, but it's still pretty bad.
Agreed. Anyway, Ship's Cannon. Now, this is part of the weird underlining of pirate-themed things, along with the weird underlining of murloc themes. This is a 2 mana 2/3 common, with whenever you summon a pirate, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. Is there anything that summons pirate tokens?
Sadly, no, I don't think so. But this card, well, okay, so the most obvious comparison to this card is Knife Juggler. And back in the day, Knife Juggler did used to be a 2/3.
And it was overpowered.
And it was overpowered. This card is quite a lot better than that because you do 2 damage instead of 1, which is pretty ridiculous.
Something I will say is the card is insane. The problem is you have to play pirates.
The problem is you have to play pirates. And you can do some crazy stuff with this. Like you can play your weapon and then in the next turn you play your ship's cannon and 2 Dread Corsairs and like a South Sea deckhand and just deal 6 damage to your opponent's board,
and then your opponent's just like, "Oh my god, that was insane!" And it's like, "Oh wait, it's a pirate deck. I don't have to worry."
But the problem is there aren't enough good pirates to make a pirate deck that could use ship's cannon consistently enough.
Are there any constructed playable pirates right now? There's one, and that's in a weird combo.
Well, I mean, the question is, does the pirate deck work? And the answer is basically no.
No, it just doesn't. This is a piece that will eventually be part of a pirate deck if they keep adding support for it, though. And in Arena, it's way better than it's constructed because it's 2 mana 2/3, and actually, you might have a pirate. Like, you might have there's the 2 mana 2/3 pirate that I keep getting the name mixed up of. The one gains attack off your weapon. But anyway, the point is you can play...
Oh, a Bloodsail Raider, yeah, that's pretty common in Arena.
Exactly.
Dread Corsair is decent in classes that have it.
Like, in Rogue, you might pick up some South Sea deckhands as, like, additional backstabs.
It's surprisingly common to pick up South Sea Captain as well.
Yeah, because it's a 3 mana 3/3.
And there are a lot of bad epics.
Yeah, exactly. And this set is adding to that pile.
So yeah, I mean... this is a really interesting card, but it's probably not going to be good enough yet.
On to the last 2-drop, and arguably the one that has got better and better and better the longer it's been out. Explosive Sheep. 2 mana 1/1 mech. Death Rattle. Deal 2 damage to all minions. They seem to keep adding class cards that work with this.
Yeah, this card is a really, really strong card.
Feign Death, it's absurd. That's basically Circle combo for 4 mana, by the way.
Yeah. 2 mana 2 Flame Strike. It's not as good as the Circle combo because
you don't get a 3/1 on the board.
You don't get a 3/1, and if you have 6 mana, you don't get a hero power. But comparing anything to the Circle combo just kind of...
it's kind of silly. Like, Circle combo is so good that you play Circle of Healing in your deck.
Yeah, that's a good...
But the point is, if you're playing Hunter, if you wanted to use that combo, you'd also have Wild Pyro in your deck, so there's another enabler right there.
Okay. So the thing about Explosive Sheep is if you play it yourself and then try and trigger it by running into an enemy minion, it's kind of awkward because it could get silenced, and
Oh god, yes.
you're going to take a bunch of damage if they just ignore and go for face, and it might not get that much value. On the other hand,
train of thought has stopped.
if you
Oh, no,
use it
backwards.
proactively, if you manage to trigger it yourself, then it will be really good. So if you're in a class which has a reliable way to trigger Explosive Sheep yourself, it will be really great. So it will be good in Mage because it's basically a better consecration.
Because you don't need to, you don't, it's basically a consecration where, if you're playing a control deck, it's just a straight better consecration, pretty much. It does have
Yeah,
a
because
weird
you have the option
backlash.
of playing it, or you can play it on turn 4 and ping it.
Yeah, exactly, and you can also, like, it will probably, in Priest, it's also got a couple of weird combinations with it, because you can use it with Wild Pyromancer and Power Word Shield, and you actually get a 3-1. It's basically a mini Orkanite combo. You get a 3-1 on the board, and you deal 3 AoE damage.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of ways that you could do it that are probably not quite consistent enough. So it might be good in Warlock, in slower Warlock decks, because you can Mortal Coil it.
Oh, yeah, you can draw if you're Mortal Coil as well.
Or you can do like a 5 damage Hellfire on turn 6.
That's true. 3 damage Shadow Flame. Haha.
You can. I mean, in Warrior, like you don't
Warrior,
like
you can
task
use
mastering it.
Death
It's really
Spine.
wasteful, but you can trigger it with Death Spell, which is really good. Really, really good.
Really, really good. You can use, if you're playing Whirlwind, I think playing Explosive Shoot might be fine.
Yeah, Whirlwind gives you a 3-mana 2-card Hellfire, which is
Actually,
not
not
bad.
bad. I mean, there's a couple of
I mean, it's
interesting...
fairly bad, but
It's fairly bad, but the point is, it's like, Explosive Sheep with one combo is not worth it, but it's kind of a... It's like, it needs testing because it's a case of, is the sum of the parts worth it?
and yeah, I mean, the thing about Explosive Sheep is it's AoE for classes that
Don't have AoE.
don't have AoE. Like Warrior's big weakness is that its AoE is terrible.
It has random AoE. It's called
Yeah, it has Brawl. That's it. Warrior's AoE is so bad they have to play Brawl. And it gives you AoE if you're a mage, and the problem with mage is you can't AoE anything until turn like 6, 7.
Their AoE costs so much mana at this point, it's ridiculous.
So, yeah, this card's pretty good.
That's the last of the 2-drops as well. Alright. On to the Triple T Terror, the Tinkertown Technician, the card where if you try and say it 5 times fast, your lips will probably run away from you. This is a 3-mana 3/3 battle cry. If you control a mech, gain +1/+1 and add a spare part to your hand. This is Dancing Sword's arch rival, which completely destroyed it.
This card is pretty ridiculous. So the 3 things that you have to consider with any kind of somewhat situational card like this is how often are you going to get it off? How good is it when you get it off?
And how good is it?
And how good is it when you don't get it off? And Tinkertown Technician, if you have a mech, it's a 4/4 that gets you a spare part, which is ridiculous.
For 3.
For 3 mana. And it's pretty easy to stick a mech. Or you can play it on turn 4 with Clockwork Gnome, or even on turn 3 with Target Dummy if you're playing that, although that's a bit less.
Target Dummy synergies, man.
But you could play it on... you can coin out
this is going to happen,
Golem,
by the way. Someone is going to get suckered by this, where they're going to silence a Mechwarper, thinking, hey, he can't play his 4-drop, and then they're just going to play Tinkertown.
Yeah, one of the nice things about Mechwarper actually is it's very resilient to silence. Like, you still have teeth.
It's still a mech. Like,
Yeah,
that's surprisingly quite important.
And then it just, like, eats their owl, and then...
Ugh, yeah, that's kind of bad. It also trades with Keeper of the Grove. I mean, they hero power.
I mean, yeah, there's no way it's ever actually going to trade with the Keeper of the Grove. But, Okay, so yeah, so Tinkertown Technician is a really strong card. One of the problems that we might have is that there are lots of good Mech 3 drops. And you want to have enough Mech 3 drops that you can make the most of your Mech Synergy cards. So you kind of want to play both Spider Tank and Harvest Golem. But then if you do that, the Tinkertown Technician is a bit clunky. So it will be interesting
Yeah.
to see what the eventual mix of those cards ends
I
up being.
think it might end up being like 2 Spider Tank, 1 Tinkertown, 1 Harvest Golem, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, it very much depends on the deck. So,
We'll have to see though. It's definitely a good
like
point
in
though.
Priest, Spider Tank is way better because, and I
You
mean,
can
it's
heal it.
because you can heal it, whereas Harvest Golem's less good. And it will depend on the metagame. So maybe Harvest Golem is banned because Cabal Shadow
Harvest
Priest is
Golem
everywhere.
doesn't kill 2/3s.
That's also a very good point.
Like Harvest Golem wars for anyone. I think this hasn't been happening as much recently because Harvest Golems got worse because of Priest. But there was actually a time period where everyone was playing Harvest Golem, and when both of you played one, it was like who blinked first.
Right.
Like,
I mean, the beautiful thing about Harvest Golem is it's almost never like correct to just kill it.
it's yeah, because it doesn't like when you kill Harvest Golem, the damage doesn't go down. That
Yeah.
was the
So
main thing.
it means that it's more likely to stick around for your technician if you coin it out.
Yeah, because
Um,
the damage golem still mech.
right. Another good thing about the 3 mana 4/4 is it's much less likely these days to get Soulfired, which is really good.
If they Soulfire this, I am super happy. I get my spare part, I protect my mech, which is still on the board, and they
Right.
discard.
Yeah, and it costs them a mana now, which is a
Yep.
huge difference. Um, so, I mean, the 3 mana clogging thing is especially difficult for classes like Priest and Rogue that really badly want to play mechs, but also have an uncuttably good class 3 drop
Yeah,
in Cultist and SO7.
that's true. It is kind of brutal there for those two classes. Like Rogue is gonna have some serious congestion problems at 3.
Mm. It's kind of also probably if you want to play Mech Warrior because you have Acolyte Pain.
Yeah, but I actually have got a feeling that if you're running Mech Warrior, Acolyte of Pain might be in the deck, but it's gonna act more like a Mage Acolyte of Pain.
Right,
No,
okay, I
play
guess
it
it's not
later.
really a 3 drop. Okay, so anything else to say about Tinkertown?
Apart from the fact he's actually pretty insane in Arena, not much. Three
Well, yeah,
mana, 3/3, and if you get the upside, it's ridiculous.
the worst case scenario of Tinkertown is a 3 mana 3/3.
Which is not terrible. It's
Which
not
is
good,
yeah.
but it's not terrible. And
You,
the
you
upside is
won't
a lot.
you won't feel quite as it feels a bit better than playing a naked Black Knight.
It'll feel bad because you're not getting ridiculous value off it, but it won't feel bad because it's miserable. It's a bit like playing Cabal. Cabal Shadow Priest on an empty board.
Yeah, I mean it's solid. Although 3 mana 3/3s are a bit worse now because they can be eaten by the Spider Tank.
Which makes us better in Rogue and Mage.
Right.
But anyway,
Especially.
so Tinkertown, good in Arena, pretty good and constructed. One of the better 3 drops they made in a while. Ogre Brute, however, is not one of the better 3 drops in a while. This is the first Ogre card, and it is all Ogre for you now. 3 mana 4/4 common. Has a 50% chance to attack the wrong enemy. This is what I'm calling the Ogre effect, because I cannot be bothered to say 50% chance to attack the wrong enemy every single time there's an Ogre. So that's the Ogre effect. Live with it. I hate this effect.
I think this is by far the best Ogre.
For the cost, I think the Rogue one might be better. Just because that's guaranteed to be bigger than
Right, okay, but
attacking.
the thing about a 5 mana 6/6 is by the time you get to that stage of the game, the difference between that and a Stranglethorn Tiger is not that huge. But
bad thing
playing a
about
3 mana
4/4
4/4 is really, really good.
The bad thing is that if you're going second and then they play Yeti, that's pretty miserable. You have like a 50. You have like.
Yeah, but like if you're going second, you could like coin out in an aggro deck and just hit their face for 4. And
That's true.
like, so basically, this is a card for So, I mean, you compare Tinkertown to Dancing Swords, but this is what Dancing Swords wanted to be. So, a lot of the time in the early game, if
Not
you have
useless.
a 3-mana 4/4, you don't really care if you hit their face or like a smaller minion, and having that early like beef it really does matter.
I think I would rather just have Spider Tank though. Like this matches up well against Spider Tank, but then it also just has a drawback to it, and it doesn't match
Yeah.
up that well against classes with ping. So I actually have got a feeling I'd just rather play Spider Tank if I want.
Yeah, and I mean the other problem with this card is again, right? So if you're playing an aggro deck, you want to come out of the gates really fast, and that means you either want to play Undertaker or you want to play Mechwarper.
We're gonna keep coming back to this, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's like unavoidable.
So it's kind of awkward because Ogre Brute is another one of those cards that's just kind of a good aggro card that like
it's just not good enough.
But it's only good in a deck that doesn't already want to play some kind of synergistic engine.
Which is most
so
of them.
Where do you fit this card in?
Yeah, exactly. And in Arena, it's good stats for the cost, although I'm not sure. It needs testing before you know how good it is in Arena. It's like Mad Bomber.
I would really happily pick this in Arena. I think it's quite a good card in Arena.
It does depend on how the whole picking metagame ends up.
Oh, sure.
Like, the drawback might be kind of miserable. As I said, it's like Mad Bomber. Mad Bomber ended up being good, but at first glance it was kind of bad. Whereas in Arena, this is the other way around. It might be bad, even though it looks good. But I'm not sure. I actually don't know.
Well, I mean, if Spider Tank is, like, dominant in Arena, and it probably will be.
It probably will be, yeah.
So and Ogre Brute is really strong.
But then Mage and Rogue are, like, the two most popular classes in Arena.
But that if this runs over a Spider Tank, it's a 2-mana swing.
True. Anyway, Goblin Sapper, 3-mana 2/4, rare, has a +4 attack boost when your opponent has 6 or more cards in his hand. Now, just want to say something. If your opponent has 6 or more cards in his hand, there's either two things happening. Either he's AFK. No, it's three things. He's either AFK, letting you win, or he's playing Priest.
Well, okay, either he's playing a really heavy control deck like Priest, or you're a mill deck.
There's not enough cards to support a mill deck yet. There just isn't.
Oh.
Like
I mean, the other thing about mill is it's very metagame dependent. So like.
It's like, I've got a feeling that what's going to happen is that you're going to end up with, like, there's going to be a mill deck, and then they're going to realize that you just milled them into a bunch of cards they can just dump on you immediately. Because there's going to be a lot more low-cost stuff running around. Even the more mid-ranging control decks are going to have a lot more low-cost removal. Because they need it for Mechwarper, as well as Undertaker now.
Maybe. So, yeah, so Goblin Sapper, again, the three things. How good is it when you get it off? How often can you get it off? How good is it when you don't get it off?
It's good when you get it off, not very often bad.
How good is a 3-mana 6/4? Well, on turn 3, a 3-mana 6/4 would be amazing. But by the time your opponent has more than 6 cards in hand, a 3-mana 6/4 is not...
They have to sit around not doing
as relevant
until turn 3, basically.
So a lot of the way that we think about why, what are good stats for a 3-mana card, right? A lot of the reason that we base our judgment on is how good that card is on turn 3. And when you play those 3-mana cards later on, those stats matter quite a lot less because your opponent has a much easier time dealing with a card that's slightly overstated.
There is a problem with this, by the way. If you're not playing against a Warlock, if he has 6 cards in his hand, basically it means he hasn't done anything. And it also means that he can actually deal with this just by playing a card, and it goes to a 2/4 again.
Yeah, well, that's the other problem with Goblin Sapper. Like, you got your 6/4, but then they can play some cards and get less than 6 cards in their hand, and then kill it with something with 4 attack.
And 6 cards is still a big hand size. Like, all you need to go down is 5, and that's still tons of options you're holding on to.
Right, and do you want to play Goblin Sapper in a mill deck? Well, probably not, because you want to be focusing on killing their stuff and milling them.
Yeah. If you're going full mill, go big or go home. Go for Clockwork Giant.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, if you're ballsy enough to actually play a mill deck on ladder, you better be going for the 8/8s.
Yeah, compared to a 2-mana 8/8, Goblin Sapper is a bit lackluster.
A little bit, yeah. But anyway, in Arena, he's good, not because of his effect, but because he's the 3-mana 2/4. That's just the thing. They've always been decent.
Yeah. It's very, very unlikely that this card will ever have 6 attack in Arena, but...
exactly.
It's 3 mana 2/4.
Exactly. Anyway, Gnomish Experimenter, the card that I've talked about the most out of the entire set, but for all the wrong reasons. This is a 3 mana 3/2 rare with Battle Cry. Draw a card. If it's a minion, transform it into a chicken. The reason I've talked about this card so much, and it's something I'm going to bring up here quickly, because Recycle and Malorn have similar effects to them. No, this is not a drawback. That's not how card games work. So stop talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, the drawback of, oh, you might chicken a really important minion is only irrelevant if you expect to be drawing your entire deck.
Yeah, it's just... it's not
Unfortunately,
relevant.
the only deck that you would ever want to play this in is Freeze Mage, where, in fact...
Do you draw your whole deck?
Do lose if you chicken the Alexstrasza.
This is not powerful enough to see play, but the whole point was that it wasn't like absolutely dirt bad. When it was spoiled, it was actually almost good enough, I would say, to see some play, but with the rest of the set coming out, it's just not good enough anymore.
So it's been clarified that the angry chicken, the chicken that you get from it is a 1 mana chicken.
Yep, it's at the bottom actually.
So
new art and everything.
Let's consider this. So if you could draw a spell, you get, or a weapon, you get a 3 mana 3/2 that draws a card, which is pretty great. Way better than
Novice
Engineer or Gnomish Inventor. But it's not so good that to make up for the drawback that probably most of the time you're, instead of playing a 4 mana Razorfen Hunter.
Yeah, 4 mana Razorfen Hunter is bad, but it was just like... The funny thing is, the drawback on this card is actually that you might not draw a spell, as opposed to milling yourself, because that actually doesn't do anything. And what that does do is it's not so much a drawback, it's just a power level drop, which you can't really sustain, because the card is barely good enough, because there's so many 3 mana 3/4s as well. So the card is barely good enough. If it always drew spells, it'd be good. It'd have a home, but not in a lot of decks. But the fact that sometimes just a 4 mana Razorfen Hunter basically is just, it's too much of a power level drop.
If there is a deck that runs mostly spells in the future and doesn't have specific minions that it relies on,
I could see this in Druid maybe.
Then you could play this, but it's very unlikely that, like Blizzard have shown, that they really don't want decks like that to exist in the game. So
yep, they made Loatheb the best card out of Naxxramas, specifically designed to kill them.
So I wouldn't expect this card to see much play.
Exactly. Illuminator. Now, we don't need to spend much time on this card. It's bad. 3 mana 2/4. If you control a secret at the end of your turn, restore 4 health to your hero.
Yeah, it's clunky. Most secrets don't really work with it. Most decks that you want to play secrets in don't really need a 2/4 that heals them. You don't want to play minions like this in Freeze Mage. In an aggro deck, you need something that has a bit more impact on the board.
Yep, that's a basic sum up. Yep.
Okay. Great.
We just went through a card in 10 seconds. Anyway, Little Exorcist, 3 mana 2/3. Taunt, Battle Cry, gain +1/+1 for each enemy death rattle. This was very, very good until I thought about it.
I don't think this card is that bad.
It's not bad, it's just not like meta-changingly good, is what some people have been saying.
Right, so it's always 1/1 bigger than their Undertaker. Basically.
Unless they play another...
And then in the next turn, you have the problem they can play another Death Rattle. And,
it's actually at its
then
worst...
trade like their Web Spinner and their Undertaker into it.
This is really awkward. At its worst, it's at its worst against Hunter-based Death Rattles, because they have Kill Command, Eaglehorn Bow, Ironbeak Owl, and Hunter's Mark.
Yeah, the other problem is, so suppose they play Undertaker, Coin Leopard Gnome into a Mad Scientist. Then you play the Little Exorcist as a 4/5. But if they played a Web Spinner, right, then they can just Kill Command on turn 3, which, like, having a Hunter Kill Commanding one of your minions on turn 3 is not, like, the worst thing in the world, but given that you're playing this card specifically to beat Hunter...
and the fact that you just took 6 damage.
Yeah, it's pretty grim. Basically, it's probably not good enough when you get the buff to justify playing it, because there are so many other great 3-drops in this set.
And when you don't get the buff, it's really bad.
Yeah, 3 mana 2/3 taunt is pretty rough. Although it's not like the worst thing in the world, it's fairly bad.
It's a Tauren warrior with no upside.
It's worth noting that, like, even in sort of even in the matchups this card isn't specifically aimed at, a reasonable percentage of the time, it's going to be a 3-mana 3/4 taunt, which is great.
Yeah, but on turn 6.
But yeah,
that's the main problem.
It's unlikely
like Goblin Sapper.
that you will want to play this card over the other 3-drops in the set, unless the meta is really Death Rattle based for some reason, which I don't really expect it to be.
The other problem is, even if there is a bunch of Death Rattle decks, Little Exorcist is really good against Undertaker, but really, really bad against Mechwarper.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if they don't have the Undertaker and their start is just like Leper Gnome into Haunted Creeper into Harvest Golem, then the Little Exorcist is going to win you the game. But
unless they kill Commander.
Yeah, there is that. So, I mean, it's quite a strong card, but
it feels it's
maybe
not
it's
not like Sludge Belcher. Like Sludge Belcher snuck under the radar because it didn't look very impressive, but it was just consistently did the same thing every single time. There's another card in the 4-drop slot which is kind of like that, but I don't think it's as good. But Little Exorcist is kind of in a weird situational area. And situational cards are traditionally not fantastic, although I could see it in some sort of sideboard for tournaments, just against like classes that play Undertaker a lot.
Right. So, I mean, undoubtedly against like really heavy Death Rattle decks, you want this in your deck. The question is whether it's good enough to justify the fact that it's a 2-mana 2/3 taunt half the time. A 3-mana 2/3 taunt half the time in other matchups.
On ladder, I don't think so.
So yeah, well, I mean, it will depend on the meta. Certainly, there will probably come a time in which this card is playable, but out of the gate, probably not.
Yep. All right, on to my favorite card out of the neutrals, at least, Hobgoblin. 3-mana 2/3 epic with whenever you play, not summon, a 1-attack minion, give it +2/+2. Now, before you say anything, I actually think this is not good enough to see constructed play, not because the effect is too weak, but because the decks it goes in work really well when you draw the Hobgoblin, and really badly when you don't.
Right. I mean, it's the classic problem that Aggro Paladin has. That you build your entire deck around Divine Favor. You play a bunch of really cheap, crappy minions so that you can empty your hand really quickly for Divine Favor. And then if you don't draw Divine Favor, you run out of cards on turn 5 and die. As compared to Zoo, which is much more consistent because you can always draw cards. Hobgoblin, and so Hobgoblin works with a lot of fun minions, like scrolling through my notes. Haunted Creeper, Echoing Ooze, Undertaker, Archsquire, Annoyatron, Cogmaster, Jeeves. It does work with Armor Smith and Acolyte Pain, but I don't think you're ever going to want to play Hobgoblin Warrior. I think the deck that you want to play Hobgoblin in is you play Paladin, you play a really ridiculously low card,
Hobgoblin,
to the extent that you probably play like Wisp, which is really good with Hobgoblin. You can play it as a 3/3 for 0. And if you get 1 activation of Hobgoblin, it's pretty good. So the goal of the deck, if you empty your hand, you play Divine Favor on Jeeves.
And Jeeves actually would work in that deck because it has 1 attack. The other weird thing, Imp Monster is a bit crazy with this. There's a lot of things that are a bit insane, like it stacks with Sword of Justice. Oh. We have a problem with the goal. We have lost a Dapper. Anyway, while I'm attempting to get Dapper back, basically Hobgoblin has a lot of interesting combo potential as far as 1-attack minions goes. It does stack with Sword, which is weird because it says whenever you play, not whenever you summon. Just give me a sec. I am just checking some stuff with Dapper. Is he offline?
Back.
We have a Dapper
I
back.
think my internet dropped.
Okay. He's back.
Yeah. Perhaps we can edit this out of the video.
No.
Okay. I was really building up ahead of Steam as well. Hobgoblin. Yeah, so the problem is you draw 8 cards with Divine Favor, but then they're all Argent Squires. And so even though you played a bunch more cards, you kind of can't do enough. Whereas with Hobgoblin, if you draw a Hobgoblin off a Divine Favor and a bunch of 1-drop minions,
It's crazy.
you can play them all.
Well, not one.
So Hobgoblin
drop,
is basically a
but one
late
attack.
game card.
Yeah. It does stack
Where-
with sword. That's basically what I was saying, was that it stacks with sword because it says when you play, not when you summon, which means that you can play something with Sword of Justice.
Oh,
and you
Sword of
still get
Justice.
the boost.
Good point. Although I don't think you'd play Sword of Justice because
Well, no, you don't.
as a
but,
paladin
like,
weapons now.
it still works.
Um,
So that's something you can think about.
So yeah, so the Hobgoblin means that instead of in Aggro Paladin now, instead of playing a board full of 1/1s on turn 8, you play a board full of 3/3s.
The problem with that
Which is-
kind of theory is you need to build around Hobgoblin because most of the Paladin aggro decks actually had 2 attack minions.
Yeah.
Because you don't tend to play the 1/1s. That's the problem with Hobgoblin decks. Like I said, I don't think the card is bad. I just think that you need to build around him so much for him to be really
Yeah.
powerful that when you don't draw him, it's just really bad for you.
Yeah, and there are some cards that would be good with Hobgoblin, like Gnome Regun Infantry, which we're going to get to in a sec.
The
we-
warrior deck actually gets the new 1/3-for-1 mech,
Right.
which works with Hobgoblin as well.
So there are cards like that which are really actually quite good with Hobgoblin, but so abysmally bad without it that you'd never play them.
Exactly.
But stuff like Haunted Creeper and Ooze and Undertaker and Argent Squire and Jeeves, it's good on its own. So it's possible that there will be there'll certainly be a really cool Hobgoblin deck here. How good it is will remain to be seen. It probably won't be good enough, but it might be.
So, I think what we're going to do for this particular video is we're going to close out at 3. So we've got 3 more cards. Since
Okay.
I want to keep this at roughly, probably an hour and 20 minutes. And then we can just split it up a bit more. But anyway, so we've got 3 more cards, and 2 of them are not worth talking about that much. Gnome Regun Infantry, 3 mana, 1/4 charge, taunt. This is the Silverback Patriarch of the set.
Yeah. So it's maybe better than Silverback Patriarch just because you do have the charge, but because it only has 1 attack, the charge isn't that relevant.
It's not a beast.
Like, you can kind of charge it into a leper gnome or something.
I would just like to point
Like
out
beast, but-
that the bar is so low.
Yeah, okay, the bar.
It's like,
but-
it's like, alright, it might be better than one of the worst cards in the game.
The charge is so inconsequential that maybe Silverback Patriarch being a beast is better.
It is, I think. Like, Silverback in Hunter, when you get it off Web Spinner, is actually not bad. I would never put it in my deck. But when you get it off Web Spinner for free, it's like actually not one of the worst things you can get or anything. It actually doesn't work sometimes.
Well, there was that classic match in Firebat's match in the World Championships where he had like an 8-attack Void Terror and it got stopped for a turn by a Silverback Patriarch and he lost the game.
That's Silverback. But yeah, Silverback Patriarch, like, it has put in some work, but that's mostly because of Web Spinner. It's a bit like King Crush getting about, infinite more kills since Naxxramas than it did before then. But Gnome Regun Infantry is just really bad. It works with Hobgoblin, but the problem is you'd never play it without Hobgoblin.
Yeah.
So
with
it's
Hobgoblin,
not
it's a
playing with
3/6
Hobgoblin.
charge, which is really, really good. But
But, yeah,
sadly,
sadly, if you don't draw the Hobgoblin, it doesn't work. Now, its neighboring card is the Stone Skin Gargoyle of the set. We're not getting any better. In fact, we're getting worse. 3 mana, 1/4 Mech. Oh, it's Mech. That's the redeeming quality.
this is definitely a candidate for the worst card in the set.
With
But I
Fury.
guess you can buff it, and it's kind of good. But I mean, it's a 1-attack minion with Wind Fury.
You know what's funny? Priest has, in the Priest section, there's contenders for both the best and worst card in the set.
Yeah. Wait, what's the worst card in the set? It's the Priest.
We'll get there, but it's like
Oh,
this-
well, yeah. We'll get
we'll
that.
get there. But Flying Machine is definitely one of those.
I mean, we're about to talk about Spider Tank, which is better than Flying Machine in pretty much every way.
Yes. Yes.
Except that you can maybe buff the Flying Machine and then it will do more damage.
Stop
But,
it. There is no redeeming quality to the
No,
flying machine.
you will never see flying machine played and constructed. You will
If
never
it
pick
had
it in
charge.
arena because one attack guys are really terrible in arena because no one picks one health minions.
Yeah, and you know what's going to happen to you if you play this? Someone is going to Shadow Madness it and double Divine Spirit Inner Fire. You're going to die on the spot because you deserve it if you're playing Flying Machine.
I guess that's where the flying machine belongs in doing Divine Spirit in a fire deck.
Yeah.
Power Word Shield, Divine Spirit in a fire attack for 24.
No, you play it in your Math Warrior instead of Raging Worm. Yeah, it's just bad. Anyway, Spider Tank. The last card will be going over here, and the card which I have quite a bond with because I called it completely. I actually bet on this card, big 3 mana 3/4 with a relevant creature type that was vanilla about 2.5 months before Goblins and Gnomes spoilers started.
And more power to you, Jesse.
And then Zumwana called the Shaman Wind Fury mech, and he was quite smug about that. So, yeah.
So
this is Yeti 3-drop.
Yeah, and the question is, how good is the Yeti 3-drop?
Better
and it's
than
pretty
Yeti.
Yeah, much better than Yeti because we were talking earlier about Ogre Brute, and the reason raw stats are much better on early game cards than they are on late game cards. So Yeti is better than a 5-mana 5/6 would be, which is much better than Ogre is, which is much better than like a 7-mana 7/8, which would be unplayable. Just because early on those raw stats are actually relevant. You can actually kill more stuff with it. It doesn't matter that you spend your turn 3 playing a card that doesn't have taunt. Whereas if you spend your turn 5 playing a card that doesn't have taunt, you can easily die from aggro deck.
Exactly.
When you play the Spider Tank, they are actually going to have to somehow come to terms with the fact that you played a 3/4 on turn 4 and they have to do something about it.
Turn 3.
Turn 3. And it trades really well with a large fraction of 2-drops. It's a mech, so you can play it for 2 mana with Mechwarper.
This is just silly, by the way. You can go coin Mechwarper, Spider Tank into like some stupid 4-drop. There's a couple.
Coin Mechwarper into Spider Tank Mechwarper. It's a Mechwarper Spider Tank. That's the dream.
And then your Spider Tank costs 1, and then if you're going for Dream, you got like Mechwarper turn 1, and then you go like turn 2 Mechwarper, Spider Tank, and then like a Neurotron and the other bear taunt thing, because they're free at that point.
So is Spider Tank better than Harvest Golem is the other question, because it has 1 extra attack, and the difference between 2 and 3 attack is quite big, although less than the other game. Especially now. But it is a bit less sticky. It does die to True Silver and Death's Bite, which is pretty bad.
Death Bite more relevant.
Yeah. Perhaps, although we don't know how good Paladin's going to be after
it's
the
not
expansion.
going to be. Anyway,
I predict good.
It can't kill Mechwarper. We had this discussion. It literally can't. But anyway, Death Bite Whirlwind kills Harvest Golem anyway, because you play the Harvest Golem first usually. So they're both bad against Death Bite.
I suppose, although you can like buff the 2/1 and stuff.
Yeah, arguably.
But right, there is the disaster scenario in which you play this on turn 3 and then it immediately dies to the weapon, which is really bad. But it can't get Soulfired. Well, it can get Soulfired. Soulfire is worse, so that's a good benefit in favor of.
It's like Dark Cultist. If Dark Cultist gets Soulfired, it was never bad, and now Soulfire costs 1 more mana.
So I think like Harvest Golem is probably better in like Shaman just because of the stickiness, and like the fact that you can buff it and then send in something massive.
You can play Flame Tongue, and that pushes this to 5, which kills Loatheb and the new Mechanical Yeti, and it kills the Screwgiant Clunker. And
I mean,
5 is relevant.
Do some pretty crazy things with this, and like, with Screwgiant Clunker, it goes up to a 5/6, which is a really good size.
Ugh. So wait a second. If you play Screwgiant on turn 4, your 3-drop eats their Loatheb.
I mean, they're probably not going to play Loatheb into that, but
They may not have a choice.
If you get if you play Spider Tank on turn 3 and then you play Screwjack Clunker on turn 4, you
have a
basically
3-drop that is worthy of hard removal.
yeah, just like if you get a good Houndmaster off Lords or anything.
Yeah, but there aren't any beasts that are 3-mana 3/4.
This is true. So yeah, Spider Tank, good note to close on. Quite a strong card. It's interesting to. It'll be interesting to see just how many decks run this guy.
I've got a feeling it's gonna be probably one of the most played mechs, because even if you're not playing Mech, it kind of feels like if you're not playing Mech, you want a 3-drop that's good against the other Mech decks, and Harvest Golem is not very good against the other Mech decks unless if you're playing Undertaker, you want Harvest Golem.
Right.
But if you're planning on playing a slower deck, you're gonna want Cultist stats because it kills 2/3s, and it helps trade with other stuff. Like you can also use it to kill that 3-drop if you have a hero power that can ping, things like that.
Suppose you're a druid. Do you play Spider Tank or Shade of Nexrams?
Ooh, that's a difficult one. It depends if I'm running double combo.
Yeah, because Shade of Nexrams is obviously so good with the combo, and also you can just leave it to grow until it's 4 attack and then eat their Spider Tank.
Exactly.
Which is pretty sweet, which is pretty sick. But
on the negative side, it's way worse.
It's a bit slower, yeah.
Yeah, it's way worse. Like if
you're against a deck where you need to unstealth it straight away.
Yeah, like you just basically it's worse on the first turn out, which is 3/3. Then it's a 4/4, but then you miss 3 damage and you can't trade with it. And I've got a feeling if you're alright, I'll put it this way: it's gonna be obvious which one's better, because if you're thinking of using your Shade to trade, it should just be a Spider Tank because you're missing a turn of trading.
Right.
To make it better than Spider Tank is a 4/4, and if you're not thinking of using it to trade, then you just play Shade.
I mean,
I think that's an easier way of looking at it. It needs testing, to be honest.
Well, maybe in the future druids will be kind of wild growth decks that play nothing but 9-drops, but you know, and we'll laugh at the idea that Shade of Nexrams was ever played in druid, but
yeah, Shade was the slow burner from Nax, where everyone thought it was terrible, and then it wasn't very good, and then it got better over time as things got a bit slower. Because after Naxxramas came out, there was buzzard combos, and the metagame was so incredibly fast that you played Shade and your opponent was just like, I'm just gonna kill you now.
I realise that we're digressing here, but people underrated Shade for a couple of reasons. One was that it seems like this great scenario where you play it and then you leave it there for 10 turns and it becomes huge and then you crush their face in, and so, as kind of the wise, experienced players, you kind of want to say, "Oh, that's never going to happen. It's really unrealistic."
It actually does happen sometimes.
But actually, against a warrior, for example, you can just leave it there until it gets huge and you can trade with it. The stealth is really relevant in a lot of matchups with the combo, and people didn't realize how good it was in Druid because you can innovate it, which makes a huge difference.
And you can use it with Fond combo to deal a bunch of extra damage.
Yeah.
So yeah, Shade was one of those cards. There were a couple cards from Nax that were kind of slow burners, and I've got a feeling, just to kind of just segue from this before we close out, I think a couple of the cards that are just from 3-drops and lower that are going to be quite underestimated and might see some play eventually are probably going to be Cogmaster, Explosive Sheep. Actually, Explosive Sheep might be on the overhyped section.
Yeah, I think people saying that Explosive Sheep is going to completely revolutionize the metagame. Going a bit.
Lil Exorcist is a little on the overhyped train, but I think she's going to transfer to the underhyped train once the set goes into playability. So there's a couple lying around that are just kind of weird. Most of them are in the upper drops, and especially 4 and 5. There's a lot more weird things over there. But this set, a lot of it just seems like the neutrals are just the base work, whereas the class cards are the actual meat of the expansion. It feels a lot more like the base set as opposed to Naxxramas.
Yeah, because Naxxramas introduced so many great cards.
And a lot of them are neutral.
And yeah, most
of them are neutral, actually. Loth, I've been looking at you. I am actually terrified, though, that we'll get to this eventually when we get to Priest. They actually did add another 5-drop, which is similar to power level of Lotheb, which is very scary to me.
Um,
So
yeah,
we'll get
Vol'jin
there
is one of my
eventually.
favorite cards in the set.
Yeah,
We'll get there.
we'll get there eventually. But anyway, that's an hour and 20 minutes, so we're going to close out this particular
All right.
part of the set review. We'll be doing the rest of the neutrals in the next part, and then we'll be splitting up the classes into one part each, just because it makes it easier to search for, pretty much. But anyway, thanks all for watching, and if you've watched the first part of the set review twice, then wow.
Well done, guys.
That's impressive, and I guess that says a lot for the guy below me who has a reputation with his accent.
If that's you, have a gold star.
Anyway, thanks for coming on, Dapper.
Yeah. Take care, Tristan.
Yep. All right. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback or just want to yell at me, put it in the comment section below. Best Analysis has been Jotto and Dapper, signing off for the day.